It's Monday and time for the Back to Business podcast, featuring Calgary's industry leaders. Welcome today's show host, Kim Hayden.
In a polarized world, certainty gets rewarded. But leaders that last are the ones that question their assumptions. Today's guest has decades of experience in global boardrooms doing exactly that. Art Korpach is here to talk about his new book, Answers for Life. And, from humble beginnings on a farm to the Harvard classroom and his MBA, he has always questioned at a deeper level. So let's ask him, how do we do it better? How do we challenge our assumptions? But first, our land acknowledgement. We here at the Calgary Petroleum Club, in a spirit of reconciliation, honor and acknowledge that the land on which we learn, work, and live is Treaty 7 region of southern Alberta. This place is a traditional homeland for the First Nations and Métis peoples, and today we all are part of this treaty land. All right, Art, welcome to the show.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I understand we are your first break into the podcast space.
Yes, I think that's the case.
I want to say, first of all, thank you for trusting us, because I know that it can be a little like, what am I doing? But I appreciate it.
Well, it's my pleasure, and I've been a longtime member of the Calgary Petroleum Club, and so glad to be here with you, Kim.
All righty, we're going to dive right in, and I want to pre-frame this. I'm going to ask you a few. I hope you're not afraid of a few controversial questions.
Not at all.
You like to think deep as to the book. You've spent the past 40 years in elite boardrooms as your time with from the chairman of the CIBC World Markets to your venture capitals to the investment. And you've managed global businesses. You are a Harvard MBA, and let's frame this like, you have literally managed massive deals like the $56 billion Suncor and Petro-Canada merger. So you have authority to actually speak to how we think, how we perceive, how we should rethink 2-3 times before we respond. What do you think here in Calgary is the one business truth that people go by that is actually a dangerous myth?
A dangerous myth.
What's a myth you think people are living by here?
Well, let me step back and just as vice chairman running the global oil and gas business for CIBC, we saw a lot of strategies and trends around the world, and the energy industry is a global industry, and the folks here in Calgary have to compete globally. So that is key. And over all those years, we used to joke that we would try to predict oil prices and natural gas prices. And, we were almost always wrong. And I believe that the industry is cyclical. There's a lot of movement. And as prices move, capital spending moves. As capital spending moves, then production levels and reserve findings vary. And that, in a way, is almost self-correcting, and that is a global phenomenon. So one of the things I think we have to be careful of here in the industry is assuming that we will have much better economics and prices going forward. We have to ensure that we remain competitive with global producers. And in the period 2013, 14, 15, we actually lost our competitiveness. I was serving on a board which had the majority interest or the largest interest in Syncrude, which is one of our key oil sands production facilities. And our costs, unfortunately, had got to over $50 cash costs per barrel. But no one seemed to care at that time because oil was over $100 a barrel. But we all know what happened to the price of oil shortly thereafter, and then we had to get more competitive. And I understand that when Suncor actually got control and started managing Syncrude, that they drove the cost down into the mid-30s. So competitiveness is key for the industry and for Canada. So we have to be careful about assuming too significant oil prices. Let me stop there.
No, I like that you said the word assuming. I want to bring this and tie this back into this Socratic thinking. So I really delved deep into this to understand. So we all know Socrates. Everybody has been raised. It doesn't matter if you are dealing with a 12th grade education or a PhD. We all have heard of Socrates and that deeper thought process. Now, I personally have never thought of it into the, Socratic thinking, like a modality of how we process. Calgary business owners, not assuming, move beyond assuming. Tell me how the rethinking through the methodology could actually help them better gauge beyond kind of the 50-50 weatherman.
Yes, no, very interesting. I had the pleasure of being actively involved with the Institute of Corporate Directors and and of course that's all about connecting directors of public companies. So in 2016 we hosted the national conference here in Calgary, and we actually asked a question that I thought was interesting to the question you posed, which is, would you like to have a majority of your board members having deep industry experience or not? And it was fairly split, about 60-40 wanting that, I believe, were the outcome of our survey. But I was in the camp that would say I'd prefer not, because you don't want to end up having people say, well, this is how we've always done it, and this is how we're always going to do it, because the world changes, technology changes. And if you're not open to sort of look and see what might be coming around the corner, then you're ripe for being disrupted and becoming uncompetitive. And so having a diverse set of views to keep you from just following what was done previously, I think is absolutely key.
I would absolutely agree. I believe diversity needs to be brought to the table, and I like the fact that there was kind of like the first step, second step, third step, or one view, second view, third view, to start rounding this out, to try to find not the correct answer, but an answer that's correct for the situation.
Exactly.
I really enjoyed diving into this. So in your book, Answers for Life, you talked about the unconstrained vision. So, and right now the world is a little bit, kind of feels a bit on fire.
Right.
And we have people who are looking to still lead and grow. When we look at the intersection of ethics and finance,
Right.
right? What do you think is the greatest challenge people are facing?
Well, there are many challenges. I do reference 2008 as an example, and which was a financial crisis, 2008, 2009. And I think that humans are driven by a drive for power and for money. There are other needs, but those are very powerful criteria or goals that are sought by human beings. And the dividing line between wealth and greed is a thin line, and sometimes we cross it. And in the book, I use the example of the financial crisis, where I think Wall Street lost its moral compass, and ironically, we have a compass on the cover of the book, lost its moral compass and did things that they shouldn't have done. I think also you can see examples like McKinsey and its involvement in the opioid crisis. And in talking to a senior person that worked at that firm, and I said, what happened? And they said, well, there were 3 reasons that it happened. Number 1 was greed. And then they said, well, then the second reason was also greed. And the third reason, they said, oh, it was greed as well. And the message was basically, when you lose sight and pursue money to too great an extent, you can cross the line. And I think we crossed the line in that period in 08, 09, and many other examples.
Yeah.
So I think it's a constant battle for anyone in business to keep their perspective on where is that line and make sure you're on the right side of it.
Okay, so we're going to have another conversation. I'm going to make sure I get Art back after his book tour because that leads us to the regulatory checks and balances.
Yes.
It's kind of like, we had a fish tank that my kids had when they were kids, and we got a succamoose. And the succamoose would grow. All the other little fish kind of like they got to a certain size, but that succamoose grew to the size of the tank. So then we went and got a bigger tank, and the other little fish stayed the same, but that succamoose continued to grow.
Right.
So it's like, had we kept the smaller tank, would have contained? Yes, it would have, right? So it's like, these are great questions because where's the balance?
Right. And that is a really tricky question. And of course, it will vary depending on the circumstance and the industry. And I'll give you two examples, maybe at either end. So antitrust laws are probably necessary in some circumstances. So that, and certainly good behavior laws, like people violating basic principles or harming the environment. We need regulations and laws for that. The flip side, though, Kim, is if we create a regulatory system and if we tie business to government and government policy, then we end up in situations where we have oligopoly structures, or even worse, crony capitalism, like what's pretty prevalent in Russia. So the U.S., I think, just to compare U.S. and Canada for a minute, has to focus on antitrust a lot, but at the same time support their industries to grow into global competitors with the strength to succeed in that marketplace. In Canada, we've created a series of regulations, over 300,000 federal regulations affecting business, that has essentially created a set of oligopolies that are somewhat protected from global competition. And I like to say to people, if you think of our country structure, when we started, we needed government involvement because you couldn't build the infrastructure and create a confederation like we did in 1867 when we only had 4 million people. So we had government railways and we had phone companies and energy companies and all those things. But we're in a different world today, 40 million people in Canada, 8 billion in a global trading market. Yet we still have a lot of government involvement, and it differs dramatically between the East and the West of Canada. In the East, we have industries like banking, insurance, telecommunications, media, railways, airline, auto, dairy, all of which are generally oligopoly in nature and heavily regulated and in some cases subsidized. And in the West, the primary industries, again, generalizing, are oil and gas, mining minerals, uranium, potash, coal, grain, timber. And we compete in global markets with global price competition and almost no subsidies. And yet we still have regulation. In many cases, that's restrictive. So Canada is a bit of a dichotomy, and that's what actually drives our political and voting differences. And so the big question, I believe, and the biggest issue for businesses out here is government policy and the uncertainty over that policy. And the question for Canada is, do we continue to want to have big government and protection, or do we want to sort of take the shackles off and start competing more broadly and attract private capital and reduce the role of government? So huge question, and I think we'll see that debated even more over the next decade in Canada.
Let's talk about young professionals, and let's apply the Socratic kind of thinking and what is in your book, Answers for Life. A young professional looking to they're aiming towards the C-suite here in Calgary in 2026.
Mhm.
What is more vital, the technical ability to close? And I think we touched on this
Mhm.
briefly. Technical ability to close a merger, or the Socratic ability to ask better or right questions.
Well, let me rephrase it this way. We used to always say, do you hire for skill, learn skills, or attitude? And I think almost everyone will say you hire for attitude, because you can always train people in technical matters, even in the finance world. And I use an example. I brought a young man on, he'd a Canadian who had gone to Wall Street, was working in the legal profession, securities law in Wall Street with a major firm, and wanted to get back to Alberta and work. And I hired him. And actually, my staff didn't support that hire because they thought, oh, this guy doesn't know finance. And I said, no, but what he does have is he has amazing interpersonal skills. He could connect with anyone just instantly. And so, and what I needed is I needed all my team who were broadly skilled and pretty good at many things to actually up their game one notch on client coverage and an understanding. And so that was part of the strategy, was to try to get everyone then to focus and say, how do we go and better connect personally with our clients? Because that then leads to future business.
Want to go back to humble beginnings. So you talk
Yes.
about humble beginnings. Um, you know, the farm and before Harvard and your vice chairman role. What's the one piece of advice that you would have liked to have received earlier in your journey that could have saved you time or
Oh,
or some mistakes along the way?
oh, interesting. And and I do talk about in the book. I look back and I say regrets. Of course, we all have a few regrets. Major regrets, fortunately, none. Loved my career, loved the focus and effort I put into the work, so no regret there. When I was young, because my father had to leave school after grade 8 to work to support his parents and his two younger brothers, he eventually got a special certificate for grade 12, but he drove into us that education is key and get a good education. And when I was giving a convocation type speech at the University of Saskatchewan for the Masters in Accounting class there one year, my message to them was, well, I think I failed at not working too hard, because my father's message was get an education so you don't have to work as hard as I am. You always have to work hard. But to your question, Kim, the piece of advice, I think recognize early on that your priorities will change over your life. And at some point, things like family and other items, and I talk about this in the chapter on legacy, will become much more important than anything you ever do in your business career. So make sure that you're not sacrificing your opportunities for those other elements, uh, because it might be too late if you don't recognize that early enough. So I think that kind of advice would be helpful. And I phrase that advice to this graduating class as give back to your community and to your profession as you go along the way. Don't wait too long to do that, because you may regret that. And obviously, family would be part of that as well.
My family, uh, they're my entire kind of go-to. They are the reason I do what I do. Um, you served on different boards like the United Way, and in here at the club. You've been on the board here at the club. So why is Calgary the best place for like the seekers out there or the legacy builders? Let's talk a little bit because Calgary has had its ups and downs,
Mm.
but I have always loved Calgary. Why is
Yes.
it a great place to be for these people?
Well, I think Calgary's number one in Canada and, of course, highly ranked around the world. I think it is this way because we have an entrepreneurial spirit. And the whole industry in the province and the business community, a lot of it was built on trust, built on a handshake for a deal, those kinds of concepts. I think Calgary is leading the way in thinking in sort of free markets. And if you just come back to the macro, every democracy in the world is really underpinned by free market activity and models, and to some extent Judeo-Christian principles. So that is key, and we are built on competition here. We don't look for the government to do it. We look to do it ourselves. We actually look for the government to get out of the way. So Calgary is great that way. Yet at the same time, the people here are fully cognizant that to be successful and to produce well-being for society, you also need to focus very much on, you can call it a safety net or taking care of your communities. And that's why organizations like United Way and others are so vital and are so successful here. And the people of this community volunteer for those organizations, and they are skilled in getting good outcomes. I often use, Kim, and I've been asked this question, what's your idea du jour for fixing or improving Canada's parliamentary system? And I say, well, why don't we use a not-for-profit model where, very skilled senior business leaders go on these boards for 3, 4, 6 years, and they do the best they can, and then they hand it off to another skilled person, and they never sell out just to maintain their role. And so if we were to have 6-year one-time terms for members of parliament, we might get some of these great business people doing great for Canada.
Well, I think that goes with any government, like being able to sit in a Senate seat or something for 30 years is like, come on. Now you're in the silo space. You're speaking amongst your peers. You're not out in the public.
You're pursuing power, not helping.
Exactly. You like, again, let's go back to that that fish. The fish that I finally had. That fish is probably still in Inverness Pond. I'm just saying. That's where it ended up. Dude, hey, you know what? I'm probably going to actually get a fine from Fish and Wildlife. I just travel now. And that was decades ago. My children are like 35 and 27 and now. But it really is. And I think that leadership, we have to keep the tank fresh.
Right.
We have to keep things fresh because, as you mentioned, life changes.
Oh, definitely. Yes.
For each one of us as we move through the different stages and places. They say that, life is what, a season, a reason, and a lifetime. And it's really, I think, quite essential that we all learn to be a little bit more nimble in our thinking and our awareness. And it's moving too fast.
Well, adaptation is key.
Absolutely. Well, you and I both listened to the All In podcast, and what was it? Not this past weekend, but the weekend prior, because I watch it on Saturday mornings like I used to watch Bugs Bunny. They introduced Open Claw, and that is a new agentic styled AI that thinks proactively on your behalf, right? And it's like these things are coming at us.
Yes.
So be nimble, think deeper, take your time. I know it's almost contradictory. Everything's moving super fast over here, but maybe take your time on your response.
Oh, definitely. Well, certainly long-term strategy should be carefully thought out and obviously modified continuously, but it is a take your time. The pressures of the marketplace force us as public companies to respond in a very timely basis, because if you don't, social media will take the narrative and you'll be coming from behind trying to change it. So you have to be prepared ahead, but definitely long-term strategy is careful thinking.
Careful thinking. I agree. Can you hold your book up so we
Certainly.
get shot here?
Yeah,
this is your
okay.
camera right here. I'm going to ask you a final question here. And I really think that you've hit the head on the nail on the head here with when you spoke just a moment ago about social media. Social media is so fast, and yet it can leave a trail of destruction, misinformation, but it also can create sound bites that help guide people. So let's think about this around that social media soundbite, a billboard. If we were to put a billboard out front here on the street, out front of the Petroleum Club, and we put it right on the street for every young professional. And when I say young professional, folks, I'm 56. So a young professional to me is anybody kind of around that 35 age. These are the people who drive the economy. They're the ones that buying the larger houses, having the babies, taking care of their parents. They're like our 30-somethings are really economy drivers. What would be your soundbite? What would be your billboard? What would be your social media post that we would post right on the street for every young professional to see?
Yes. One phrase might be reason versus emotion. I think in today's world, you've got a large segment of society that is acting and behaving on emotion. And if we step back, actually, the end objectives that most of society want are fairly aligned. And so, what we're differing on is how do you get there? What are the policies, actions, behaviors that get you to the best outcomes? And if you think logically and reasonably, and you dissect it, and that starts by asking a whole series of questions, not the first one, but questions underlying the top question. Like, for example, if you looked at Canada and you said, you know, do you support the current government? Well, I'd say, well, don't answer that question. Ask the question, well, what does Canada need for policy? What do we think is broken? How should we go about fixing that? And what are the elements that we're trying to achieve or attract that will create that fix? And then when you've answered those kinds of questions, you probably are better positioned to answer the first question. But I think in the social media world, Kim, unfortunately, many people are working in, 40 character sound bites. They're not reading the detail. They're not seeking truth. They're acting on headlines. And in part, it's because they want to feel part of a community, part of a group. And when Facebook introduced likes, my goodness, now everybody wants to be liked. Well, excuse me, but likes don't drive truth or good outcome. And if you go back to examples like Galileo or Einstein, they were persecuted for their views in their time. Yet they were thinking critically and brilliantly and were right. And if you look at examples, and I talk a bit about this in the book, Michael Crichton and his State of Fear book, which is fabulous. I really love that book. And how societies jump on issues and become passionate about them, only to then be proven that maybe their thinking wasn't critical. The other soundbite that was driven home to me at Harvard Business School was perspective. One of our professors used to chide us all the time and go, hey, you guys, you have no perspective. You better figure out how you get it and how you keep it. And so perspective, I would use example of global energy and climate change and energy transition. And right now, 1 billion people in the world, the lucky 1 billion, seem to think they have the prerogative to make energy policy for the world. And so the question of perspective would be, well, do you think the other 7 billion who are really desperate to get energy and improve their well-being, what do you believe is their view on this? And why should we make policy for them? So again, reason versus emotion and perspective would be two possible sound bites I would think of for this new generation.
Art, you're a rock star. Thank you. Thank you for coming on the show, allowing us to be your first in this digital kind of space where you're stepping into and sharing your thoughts and the answers for life. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much, Kim.
You know what, folks? Take time, ask deeper questions. Be the 3-year-old. Why? 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 If a 3-year-old can learn from this and navigate life through this simple phase of asking why did we stop asking? So be sure to visit answersforlifebook.com. And we're going to have all the information in our show notes so you can take this thought modality and apply it to wherever you are in life.
Thank you for joining us today on the Back to Business podcast. Be sure to visit calpeteclub.com, CALPETECLUB.com, to find out more about upcoming events, networking opportunities, and membership. If you are not already a valued member at the CPC, where we are proudly connecting and supporting Calgary's business leaders.